Okay, guys, I have received the divine assignment to finally sit down and make this video talking about my experiences with mental illness. But the purpose here isn't just to tell my story because whatever. The real purpose here is, why did I choose to be mentally ill? How has it actually served me? And how did I heal myself? That's the point here. The point isn't just to dwell on my story of mental illness, right? The point is that I chose this, it was worth it, and I healed myself, right? Moving through to the completion of this story. So I guess a very quick background, right? I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1. I've been diagnosed with ADHD, social anxiety, and a dissociative disorder that they couldn't actually diagnose because there was no treatment for it, so they didn't bother diagnosing it. But none of that matters anymore. None of that matters anymore. Because it's years in my past at this point, and this whole video is really to drive up to my personal healing experience, right? How did I heal myself from this? Because of course bipolar disorder is, as all of the doctors told me, a lifelong uncurable disease, right? It cannot be cured. It can be treated, it can be managed, which is what I did for 5 years once I was diagnosed finally at 24. And was on some, really hard-hitting medication for 5 years. But then finally I had a deep spiritually healing experience, and that is when it all changed for me. That's my cat trying to get into the cupboards. So I don't know, I feel like I need to give a little bit of background here into my experience, like what did bipolar feel like to me? What was my experiences with mental illness? I don't want to get into the whole story of my whole life here, because that's not really the point of the video, right? But I guess just very briefly describe when I was a kid, right from when I was 4 years old, already mentally ill at 4 years old. My social anxiety was extreme to the point where I couldn't function at school. It was completely crippling, completely debilitating. I had no ability to function, which of course led to bullying and blah, 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 boring stuff, right? As I got older, I got more and more depressed. I became more and more disassociated from reality, years of being suicidal, years of existing in that space where you haven't quite killed yourself yet, but you just might at any moment, and you're just kind of existing in limbo, feeling like it's not exactly like I want to kill myself, it's just that I want to stop living, right? I just wanted it to stop. That feeling of I just want it to stop. I just want it to stop, right? And just existing in that kind of space, existing, right? Not living, existing in that kind of space for so many years. Of course, all the whole time dealing with ADHD symptoms, which I didn't ever know I had until I was 24. So that made, daily functioning difficult, even when I wasn't in an extreme depression or an extreme manic episode. My worst months, right? My worst stretches of time, my worst months were when I was manic. And so, I mean, if you're still watching this and you need a trigger warning, click off now, okay? Because we're going to talk all the way, right? My worst moments were when I was manic, and these are the moments that even the people who've seen it don't see it, right? Even the people closest to you who have seen this, they don't see it all the way. It's something that's almost impossible to describe. But again, at the same time, this is one of the reasons to make this video, I think, is that we all think that we suffer in complete solitude, but really there's millions and millions of people feeling what you feel, right? So even when you feel like no one can understand, there's in fact millions of people who completely understand. That's important here. That's important here. But it's weird. It's the people closest to you, even if they see it, even if they're witnessing it, they can't fully see it. So, when I was the most manic, it was like my entire consciousness became completely overwhelmed by an energetic storm. Like inside my head, I would say it would be like an electrical storm inside my head. And it felt like I was a million miles away, like lost millions of miles away inside of my own head. Like it'd be the feeling of an electrical storm so vast that it was just millions of miles across, and I'd be lost at the very center of it. And that's how far away I felt from reality. And it was so debilitatingly painful that I would do self-harm to make it stop, right? Self-harm to make it stop. And that's something that, again, the psychiatrists don't get either, because the psychiatrists, when you're sitting in that chair and they get you to admit, yeah, I do self-harm, right? They always say, oh, did you do self-harm so that you could feel something? Because you were so numb, you had to harm yourself to feel something. And yeah, so I said, yeah. But I remember thinking, well, that's not it at all. That's not it at all. I understand that that's how self-harm is for some people, but that's never how it was for me, right? For me, it was self-harm, never with blades, always with burns. I would stick my hand in the toaster. that was like an instant cure. I would feel instantly better after sticking my hand in the toaster, because there's something about the adrenaline, right? The groundingness of pain instantly puts you back in your body. And that is something very, very important in terms of like my spiritual lessons here. Why do we feel pain? Why do we suffer? It's grounding. Pain puts you in your body like nothing else can, right? So when I would be in it, like this dysphoric mania, being lost in the shitstorm inside my head, pain would clear that right up and click me back into my body. And sometimes I could get up off the ground, right? And I could stand up straight and I could look out at the world, and I would find myself back fully present in the world, freed from the electrical storm. It was very interesting. So that's why I don't really regret even that. Like I have no problem talking about this, because I have no shame about this, because it was not bad, right? It was not bad. It was like, it was good for me. It was good for me to engage in self-harm, because it is, I mean, is that an insane thing to say? I'm saying this from being down the line, like years and years since I have ever done this, right? Years and years since I have ever done this. I look back and I say, like, I can look back on those moments and go, that was not a shameful moment for me. That those were moments where I did what I had to do to stay alive, right? I did what I had to do to stay alive. And that is something else. You know, a lot of people message me in private and talk about how, you know, they're spiritual, but they're taking psychiatric medication. Should they feel bad? Should they try to really hard to get off the medication? Is the medication blocking them? And so on and so forth. And I always just say, like, don't feel any shame for taking your medication. I know there is this huge, like, war, right, between, like, spirituality versus psychiatry, and they're at war with the, you know, the psychiatry camp saying, you know, spirituality has nothing to do with it. You must, you know, do cognitive behavioral therapy and take your medication, right? And then the spiritual camp saying, like, medicine is terrible, never take medication, it will just make everything worse, and you need to be feeling your feelings, and you need to be working through your problems and all of this. I'm not interested in that war at all, right? I'm not interested in that war, because if you are really in it, right, you need to do what you need to do to stay alive. And even if you're staying alive, right, even if, you know, it's not like a life or death situation for you, you need to do what you need to do in order to function, right? In order to function, in order to go to work, in order to wake up in the morning and be able to put on pants, in order to take care of your children, right? You need to do what you need to do to function. And if that includes taking medication, then do it, right? Don't feel any shame about that. You need to do what you need to do what you need to do, right? You need to do what you need to do what you need to do. And don't have any shame about that. Let's see. What else is relevant here? I'm literally just like going through the Rolodex, not really intending to tell my whole story just because I don't feel like it's relevant, but there's like relevant points. So self-harm is not a shameful thing. And I don't regret doing it. That's the thing, right? Like, I don't know why this is a sticking point. A lot of people, I mean, sometimes people open up and talk about how they would engage in self-harm. And, you know, to try and reduce the stigma of that, but I don't really know if that's really gone far enough, because there's always this feeling of regret, like as if I should go back in time and undo the self-harm, right? It's like, I don't, do you know what I'm saying? It's like this feeling of, you feel like you're supposed to regret the self-harm. Well, then that's not completely accepting it now, is it? That's not completely accepting it now, is it? I don't regret it at all. I don't regret my moments of self-harm. I don't. And I feel, and I will not apologize for that. So anyway, that aside, what else is relevant here? So why did I choose bipolar? What is the unique spiritual lessons that you receive from bipolar disorder? Well, I mean, some of this will be shared with any other type of experience that we have in life, right? You know, like specifically for me, bipolar was inherited from my family, right? So it's like, as I heal myself from that, I heal my ancestors, you know, all of that, yada, yada, yada. It is a way of processing negative energy and ultimately releasing it, yada, 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 kind of all the usual stuff. But interestingly, right, because those of you who watch my channel, I know this video is probably going to attract some people who will only ever see this one video from me, but for those of you who watch my videos, you know, I'm always talking about polarity, right? I'm always talking about duality, and then like the exploration of duality. And while there's a really good way of experiencing the entire spectrum of the emotional human experience, right? The whole spectrum of the human emotional body is to be bipolar, right? And I do actually claim that as a thing that I was, right? I never used to like to say I have bipolar. I would say I am bipolar. The psychiatrists discourage that because they don't want you like identifying with your disease, but it always felt to me like this is something that I am, right? Because it was such an integral part of my consciousness. It was such an integral part of how I moved through the world. It's like, no, I really was bipolar, because my consciousness would flip-flop from one extreme to the other, and then everything in between. And that was part of how I experienced energy. That was part of how I experienced reality, right? It was almost indistinguishable from my own identity. In fact, when I first got on medication, and so I was taking, you know, the big bad Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic, which is, man, you don't want to take that if you don't have to, but if you have to, then do, right? You'll know if you really have to. I don't regret taking it at all. I took it for almost 5 years. It saved my life, right? It kept me in my body. So I don't regret it at all. But it was very interesting. I remember after I went off it, I had a kind of a bad day a couple months after I went off it. And I thought, well, maybe I can just take one and get to sleep, right? But man, when I felt the medication like re-entering my bloodstream after I had already like detoxed from it, I felt it like sucking me out like into like this cold, dead space. And I was like, wow, I don't need to take that medication ever again, right? You only want to be taking that if you are like manic or psychotic. It's nasty stuff. But again, I don't regret it because it kept me alive, and it showed me what it is like to be quote unquote normal, right? I didn't actually know, because I had never once in my life had like a moment where I wasn't mentally ill until I was like 30, right? Literally like every moment of my life, it was like part of me, right? It was part of my experience, literally every minute of every day. So I didn't know what it was like to be normal until I got on my medication, and I was like, wow, this is what it's like to look at the world with like a clear mind. This is what it's like to look out at the world with nothing bothering me in this moment. I had literally like never had a moments of peace until I got on the medication. I was also taking Wellbutrin, which is an antidepressant, and it also helps with the ADHD symptoms. And I was popping benzos, you know, because they just let you take benzos at will when you are a psychiatric patient, right? So I got really lucky. I was able to get off of all of my meds eventually with no like physical harm to my body and no addictions to them. So that was really good. What else? Drinking, right? Daily drinking, like daily drinking alone by myself before noon. That's another thing. So I mean, I still drink technically. I will have a drink every now and then, but that was another interesting thing that happened. So I used to always I used to live for the next drink, right? Because like it would just feel so good, right? What felt better than having a drink? It'd be like, ah, now I feel so much better, right? But as I went through my whole healing process, the alcohol just, first of all, I lost my tolerance like almost entirely, right? I used to be able to do 8 shots and like go to work, okay? Like I had like tolerance like through the roof, right? Because, drinking runs in my family. I was like born with a high tolerance for it. And I had built up a really good tolerance for it. So I used to be able to drink. Suddenly, as I went through my healing experience, which I'm going to get to, which is the main point of this video, suddenly I would have like one beer and like be sick. It was like completely ridiculous. Or I'd be hungover for like 3 days. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And then I would notice that the alcohol started feeling different in my body. That I could feel it, and it started to feel like a poison, and I was like, well, yeah, right, alcohol is a poison. And finally it started to feel like a poison to me. It stopped feeling like a medicine, right, like something amazing, and it started feeling like a poison. So I never really quit drinking. It was never a big thing I had to go through. It just went away, right? The desire to drink just went away. The urge to drink just went away. I realized there was just a day came where I realized that I had the same bottle of rum in my liquor cabinet for 6 months, and I just hadn't even been drinking it just because I didn't feel like it, and just because I didn't want to. So, now even though I technically still do drink, like I'm not like against drinking spiritually speaking, I just almost never do. It's like special occasions or every once in a while, if I'm out to dinner, I'll have a glass and like that's it. And I typically am always like, that wasn't even really that great. I should probably drink even less than I do because I think I would feel even better. But right. So anyway, there's the alcohol thing. What else? There's just one funny moment. I remember when I was in university, I was doing some kind of group project. So I was talking to one of my classmates, right? Like sitting there, I actually had to talk to her, getting past the social phobia, right? And she was just talking about how she's not a morning person, right? She hates getting up in the morning. And I was like, yeah, like I hate getting up in the morning too. Like every morning I brush my teeth and I stare at myself in the mirror and I just want to kill myself. That's like just what I blurted out and what I just said to her. And I was like, yeah, and I just think about killing myself the whole time I'm brushing my teeth. And she just like cracked up laughing because she thought I was joking. And I was like, oh my God. Well, is that not normal? I was like, oh my God, is that not normal? And then I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't tell people stuff like that, right? But like that was like my normal space, right? That was how I was. That was my normal space to the point that I could just blurt stuff like that out to people. And now I find it all very funny. Right now I'm in this place where I look back and all of this is just very funny. And that actually tells me how much I have healed from all of this. And I know this is all completely out of order, but that's just how this is going to be. I'm just going to keep jumping around to what seems relevant in this moment. What else? Okay, so let me jump to, we're all pretty familiar with the idea that we take on negative experiences in our lives so that we can learn, so that we can help others, right? So that we can grow, all of those things. And that helps us make sense of our own suffering, right? That helps us make sense of our own pain. Mental illness is like a really, really good way of processing this, I think, because I know a lot of people who, have had their negative experiences have been done to them by outside forces, right? Been done to them by outside forces, by other people or by circumstances or by society or whatever. That has its advantages because those people can find other people who have had similar experiences and they can like validate each other's suffering, right? This was done to me. Oh, it was done to you too. Now we understand each other. Of course, you can do that with mental illness as well. It's just a little bit harder. But when you have things done to you by outside forces, you have to go through this process of forgiveness, right? If someone has done something to you, in order to heal, you need to learn to forgive them, and that is this massive, massive hurdle. So I've come to understand that in running almost all of my negative experiences through mental illness, right? Running them through my own mind, running them through my consciousness. I kind of skipped over that part, right? So I got to experience extreme internal suffering. And this whole time I was always aware of, it was always this really surreal experience of, look how much I suffer even though nothing is being done to me. Because this is part of the thing about mental illness, is that your suffering is invisible, right? Even if it's sort of visible, right? Someone can see if you're depressed, sort of, and someone can see if you're struggling with anxiety, yes. Someone can, and if you're manic and you're really acting out, people can see that, right? But the suffering, it's harder to validate, right? And sometimes we do want people to validate our suffering, but when your suffering comes from mental illness, a lot of the time that validation is just not there. I will really know that I've healed from my past experiences with mental illness when I no longer desire any kind of validation, and when I no longer need anyone to like recognize or understand where I'm coming from, right? When I can just completely put that to rest. And I think this video actually helps with that. So back to what I was talking about how, yeah, choosing to run my pain through a experience that was entirely internal, where no one was ever doing anything to me, that actually allowed me to get over it a lot faster. It allowed me to skip forward in terms of my healing journey. It was like, as soon as the mental illness stopped, I was free. I was like, wow, because I had no one to blame, no one to feel, like no one to be angry at, right? There was nowhere to direct any of like the residual feelings of victimization. And yes, I mean, I did feel like a victim. All of my life I felt like a victim, but like it was like a victim of what, right? It was just like a victim of my own mind. I felt like a victim of my own mind and a victim of my own inner pain. But as soon as that stopped, there was no residual feelings of victimization, right? I was just able to go from, I used to hurt and be a victim. Now it's over. Now I am free, right? There wasn't like this translation process of trying to like heal from the victimization itself. So that is one reason that I know on a deep level why I chose this path to walk, right? Because I knew that it would just help streamline my healing experience, right? Streamline my healing experience, because I got the benefit of going through all of this struggle, right? But then I didn't have to do some of this extra stuff, right? I didn't have to do some of this extra stuff. So this is just to say that like now I understand and I'm grateful for why on a higher level I chose bipolar disorder and mental illness in general as my path of struggle, because in the end, it was actually better, right? It was actually better that way than having people do things to me, right? Because I could just be instantly freed from it when I got to my healing experience. So how did I heal myself from bipolar? And I do claim myself as healed, guys. I know if you're watching this and you have bipolar, you are absolutely right to be skeptical, and you're absolutely right to be like, this girl is just in remission and like she can relapse at any moment and all of that. And yeah, I mean, you're right? Like I don't expect anyone, especially, if you're familiar with how bipolar goes, I don't actually expect anyone to believe me on this. This is just something that I claim for myself, right? I know the bipolar is gone. It is gone from my system. It is not part of my experience anymore. And I mean, how to describe how I know that? It's almost impossible, right? It's almost impossible to describe that. I can feel it. I'm completely different now, right? So that is why I do claim myself as being healed from bipolar. I can feel it. I can feel it. I'm a different person now. But of course, you don't have to take my word for it. That's fine. Anyway, so this all happened around the time of my spiritual awakening, when I had been an atheist and I was going through my spiritual awakening and I was starting to meditate. At this point, my mental illness was very much under control using medication, and I had been fairly stable, like 75% stable, and 75% was a good achievement for me, right? To go from 100% crazy to like 75% healed and only 25% crazy, that was really good. So that was I was in that kind of space, and I started meditating. I'd only been meditating for a few weeks, so pay attention to this, right? There's this misconception that you need to meditate for years and years and years. Maybe you need to be a monk sitting on top of a mountaintop for 40 years before you can have this kind of experience. No. You can be a complete novice. You can know nothing about how to meditate. And if you're open to it, if you have an adventurous spirit, if you're truly willing to have this happen, you can have this kind of experience tonight, right? You can have this happen tonight. You can have it happen 5 minutes from now, right? You do not have to wait. It does not take practice. It's just the divine timing of it and your willingness to actually have this experience. And it does take an adventurous spirit. It does take courage, and it does take a leap of faith. So this is my big healing experience. And there's no process. There's no process to healing, to how I healed myself. There's no process. There is no steps. It was a miracle. Really what it was an out-of-body transcendent experience where I was removed from my body and I was healed. So I was sitting on my couch meditating, right? I didn't meditate on the floor in the lotus position. I sat on my couch with cushions behind my back, meditating, right? And I was just sitting there, just trying to, clear my mind and open up and relax, just trying to learn to meditate. I was practicing at this point. And I saw before me, I felt myself getting into a very deep state of meditation, right? Like kind of going down the gears. I was getting very relaxed. I was just focusing on my breathing. I was letting all of the thoughts dissipate. I was just breathing in and out. And I felt myself chug down into those deeper states of meditation. I saw in front of me the golden light. That golden light, the indescribable golden light. And it was beckoning me. It was it didn't say anything, but it was just wanting to pull me in, but I knew it would not take me unless I consented. It was asking me, do you want to come in? Do you want to come into the light? Do you want to come into the light? Do you want to come into the light? And I said yes, right? You have to say yes. I didn't say yes out loud, right? I just felt a yes. I just felt my consent be given. And then I moved towards the light. It was huge at this point. I was right up in front of the golden ball of light. And then as soon as I said yes, as soon as I felt a yes, I went through a tunnel, right? A quantum tunnel. It was just like going through a tunnel, like a wormhole of light, right? The light was all going around me. And I just kind of lifted up out of my body, and then I don't remember anything at that point because I was gone. I had gone into the golden light. I had traveled out of my body. I had gone into the light, and there was nothing more for me to remember. I have a different experience of, this is not the only time I've gone into the golden light. I have a different experience of going into the golden light, which I actually do remember what I saw on the other side. I went into the light and I met beings and I saw things and I had experiences and memories, but that's a different story for another day. This particular experience, I don't remember anything. Until I have no idea how much time had passed at this point. I was home alone. The next thing I remember is slamming back into my body. It was this feeling of falling, and then slamming into my body. It was like I hit my body. I don't know what kind of speed I had been going at. It was the feeling of slamming into my body. Physically, I was absolutely ice cold. The interesting thing is I was still sitting up. My back had been propped up on the couch, right, with pillows behind me. I was still sitting up, but I was really slumped. My head was slumped down, kind of on my chest, and I was kind of hunched over, but I was still upright. I hadn't fallen over or anything. My body was completely ice cold. I have never in my life been that cold. I had to gasp for breath. It felt like I hadn't been breathing, and it felt like my heart had not been beating. So, I have no way of verifying what had physically happened to my body at this point because no one was there to know. All I can tell you, I can only describe the experience, right? I slammed into my body. I gasped for breath, and there was no air in my body at all. I filled up my entire lungs gasping, and I just gasped for breath. And my heart was just pounding. I could hear my pulse pounding in everywhere in my body. My heart was racing so fast and pounding really loudly. But my body was ice cold, like it. freezing cold. And I remember I couldn't move, so I just like flopped over onto the couch. Luckily there was like a bunch of pillows next to me, and I just lay there gasping, trying to suck air into my body and feeling my blood move around and trying to warm up. And I think after doing like some breathing and after breathing and after getting my blood moving, because honestly, guys, the impression that I get is that my body had stopped. It was like, you know, like, I don't know if it counts as a near-death experience, right? But this was like, I've heard, if you know the states of samadhi, there are these states of samadhi, states of like deep states of meditation where, the heart stops beating and the lungs stop breathing, right? And that is what it felt like to me. But I have no way of verifying what actually happened. So anyway, so once I get some air in my lungs and once my heart starts beating and I start warming up a little bit, then I think I fell asleep. And you know what? Then I just got up and like went about my day. I was like, oh, that was a pretty weird experience. At the time I had like no idea. But everything changed after that. Everything changed after that. I started feeling the medication in my body, and I started feeling like it wasn't helping me anymore. It started feeling like it was poisonous to me. Started to feel like the medicine was poisonous to me. And I had always said that I loved my medication. I said that it was great for me. I had no side effects from it except for like dry mouth, right? My medication it agreed with me really well. But all of a sudden, after this out-of-body experience, suddenly my medicine was like bothering me and I could feel it was wrong in my body. And so I started tapering it off very slowly. I didn't go cold turkey or anything. Very slowly over like 3 or 4 months, I started tapering off. But in this time, like my mental health started doing like way better, right? I was feeling so much more peace. I could just sit in peace. But I was still having like residual depression. I was still having some depression. And one day the depression got really bad. It was like a face down on the floor type of day, right? I was like laying on the carpet on my floor, not a very comfortable floor, right? It was like a really thin rug on a kind of just cold laminate floor, face down on the floor, just because I had no energy. I couldn't get up. And it was just that feeling of despair, right? That feeling of despair so bad you can't stand up. That feeling of emptiness, that feeling of rottenness. But there was something different about it this time. And like this feeling, right, being face down on the floor type of depression, this was so familiar to me at this point. It had been, years of my life spent in that state. So it wasn't particularly noteworthy or interesting at all. But I remember going, this is different. Today, this is different because I was completely fed up with it. I was like, and it's interesting to say because of course I had always been fed up with it. It's not like I ever really wanted to be depressed. And I was always striving to pull myself out of depression. Always striving. Because when you're mentally ill for every day of your life, all you're ever doing is striving to just feel a little bit better, right? You're just striving to feel a little bit better. So, but I remember noticing that day that it felt different because deep inside me, there was this like core feeling of I am ready to be done with this. I am so ready to be done with this. Like epically done with this. I was like, I am fed up. I'm going to do whatever it takes to free myself from this right now. And of course that had been a desire that I had had my whole life, but there was just something about this day, the determination. Just, I don't know. It was just different. It's hard to describe, right? All of this is hard to describe. So I like pulled myself up, forced myself to sit up, and I put on some shamanic drumming, right? Just like a drum beat. And I decided to sit and meditate. And I was just asking for help. And I was just opening up. I was just like, send help. And of course I had asked for help a million times before, right? A million times before. I had always asked for help. So again, it's hard to describe. Why was this one day different? I don't know. Divine timing, right? This was the day that it was going to be different. The day that I was going to finally be healed had finally arrived in perfect timing, right? So I sit down to meditate, and I'm just sitting there meditating. And a blue dragon comes up very viscerally, very visually. And again, this is the beginning of my spiritual journey. At this point, I would probably still call myself an atheist at this point, even though I had been into the golden light and I had been having all kinds of experiences. I just kept like hanging on to my identity as an atheist. So even at this point, I would have said I was an atheist, but I saw this blue dragon comes in, and the blue dragon took me underwater, and we swam underwater, and I was seeing this, in my inner vision in the meditative state. And he took me to the bottom of this like lake, and he showed me this disgusting, rotten heart, like a really huge human heart. It was like this big, was pulsing, but it was completely rotten, like rotten. I knew that it was my heart. That was my heart. It was a rotten heart. And I was like, that's disgusting. I was like repulsed by this in this vision. And it was like overcome with this feeling of, I have to destroy this. There was this really destructive impulse came out. I was like, I have to kill it. I have to kill my own rotten heart. I have to kill my own rotten heart. That's how I felt. And so as soon as I like accepted this feeling of I have to kill my own rotten heart, the dragon and I merged, and I felt that I was the dragon. Like I could feel like my jaws, and like I had the dragon jaws and the dragon teeth, and me and the dragon merged as one, bit the heart, ripped into it and shredded it. Just like a dog playing with his toy. Shredded the heart, we shredded it, ripped it up, tore it to pieces until it was gone. And then we separated, and I looked and saw that there was a brand new heart there, bright and pink and beautiful and beating perfectly clean and healed and pure. Then I snapped back to myself, took a big deep breath, stood up, and was like, wow, I feel great. What an amazing day. I'm never going to be depressed again. And I walked off and like did the dishes and walked my dog and carried on with my day. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was right. I have not been depressed or manic or any of that since then. And that was 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And yeah, I've had hard days. I've had bad days. Sometimes I spend all day crying. I've been through a grieving process since then. I've had things happen. I've had struggles, right? But none of it is the same. None of it's the same, right? Of course, even when you're mentally well, of course you still grieve. Of course you still have hard days. Of course sometimes you get emotional and you cry. Of course you still purge the past and negative experiences. That all still happens, but it's not the same. It's not the same as mental illness, right? Definitely it's not the same as bipolar. It's not the same as depression. You can have a bad day. You can have a low day, you can have an emotional day without actually being depressed. I know that now, right? You can grieve without being depressed. They're different things, right? They're different things. So yeah, I still have hard days sometimes, but they're within the realm of what I would call like normal, right? It's not bipolar, it's not depression, it's certainly not mania. And that all of this completely freed me up to go on my spiritual journey, because of course there's this huge topic of the difference between a spiritual experience and psychosis, right? So that was one of the things I went through when I first started having spiritual experiences. I was like, well, I'm bipolar. How do I know I'm not just completely losing it, right? Should I go back and take more antipsychotics? Because I'm starting to have these, mystical experiences and visions and seeing things and having beings talk to me and stuff. How do I distinguish that from psychosis, right? How do I distinguish that from psychosis? I mean, this is a very personal thing, right? If you have experienced psychosis in the past and now you're trying to figure out, are your spiritual experiences real or are you just psychotic, right? Very personal, but all I can tell you is that for me, the difference is, I don't know, it's just so obvious. It's so obvious. First of all, a real spiritual experience for me is beautiful, right? Is beautiful and loving and euphoric and exciting, and it doesn't have that manic edge, right? It's not crazy, even though sometimes it's like, wow, this is totally crazy. Sometimes my spiritual experiences, sometimes they seem crazy, but it's not the same type of crazy. It's just like unbelievable and mind-blowing, but it's not the same type of crazy. It's just not the same type of crazy. And like back when I had, delusions, right? So an easy example is one morning I woke up back when I was bipolar, and my cat was looking at me, and I was like, the cat is out to get me. The cat is plotting against me. He's part of the cabal, and he's plotting against me. And I was like, and so, the little sane voice inside my head was like, you're crazy, right? That's a crazy thought. That's delusional. That's delusional. Because of course my cat is not plotting against me, right? So, I could use my intellect, right, to discern between delusions and spiritual experiences. Typically, spiritual experiences for me don't have any impetus behind them, right? They're never like, you have to do something, right? My guides never tell me to do anything. They might give me sometimes give me a direction to go in, like a nudge in a direction, but there's never any impetus. There was only ever forgiveness and love and acceptance and non-judgment. They're never telling you to do anything. They don't tell me anything scary, right? They might sometimes tell me things that blow my mind, but it's never like weird, right? And yeah, so I have had hallucinations in the past. What's the difference between a hallucination and a vision? I mean, on one level, there really isn't, because this is the thing. This is the thing that's really hard to describe. My bipolar symptoms, especially when they manifested with like hallucinations, because hallucinations isn't like really a bipolar symptom, and that's like a psychosis symptom, and then psychosis kind of can go along with mania for some people, but not all people, so it's a little bit different. And like mania and depression, all of these things, all of my mental illness symptoms, I really see them as, yes, biology, right? Biology is real. I have biology that made me prone to developing bipolar disorder, right? But there's also the spirituality of it. There's also the energetics of it, right? And now I kind of understand that I was always like, my crown chakra was always like wide open, and I was always receiving all of this energy. But my vessel, right, my human vessel was all clogged up, was all blocked up. And so whenever I was receiving all of this energy, it would just get seriously distorted. So now when I receive spiritual energy, like a communication, it just comes through and it's nice and clear, and it's euphoric and beautiful and loving, and it's inspiring, and I'll get information and I'll write it down, right? And I can channel and all of these things, and it's just nice and clear, and it flows nicely, and it's just a very pleasant, good, uplifting experience. But back when I was all messed up, right? Back before I had this out-of-body experience that I think when I went into the golden light, I personally believe that I had like massive blocks removed, that I had some really serious implants, right? Blocks, whatever you want to call them. Like I had stuff blocking me up, clogging me up, energetically speaking. And I think a ton of that was removed when I went to the golden light. But before that was removed, it would just distort all of the spiritual energy. And so, when I was having hallucinations or having these really crazy thoughts, thinking that my cat was plotting against me and stuff like that, that might have been, I think it was inspired, like at the very base of it, by like some kind of spiritual download, but it was just so distorted by my own messed up self that it just ended up being totally whacked, right? So so the difference is not clear cut, right? Everything is, do you guys kind of know what I mean, right? Everything is kind of coming from the energy that you are receiving, but it's like, how distorted is it getting, right? How distorted is the energy getting? And if the energy is getting seriously distorted by whatever blocks you have in your energetic system, then that's when I will personally call it for myself mental illness, right? Or delusions or hallucinations or psychosis, because it's just gone so off the rails and it has been so far distorted from the original energy that came to you that I don't really consider that, for me, like a spiritual experience. It was like a derailed experience. It was a distorted experience, right? Yeah, so for me, I don't really have much of a struggle now differentiating, especially because now I don't ever have any of those really seriously distorted experiences. Maybe once in a while, if I'm like really kind of like really agitated, really hyped up, and like angry about something, I find like anger, if I'm angry about something or if I'm feeling judgmental towards something, that kind of like those kind of feelings, right? That will distort the energy, the spiritual energy I receive. That will distort messages I channel. And that's only happened twice. There's been 2 videos I've recorded when I was in that kind of like agitated state of mind, and I ended up not posting them because I realized later, I was like, that was more distorted than I'm willing to post. Of course, I don't know if anyone is ever a perfectly clear channel, right? We're all distorting the energy we channel all the time. But, and that's not bad, right? That's not bad. Your ego distorts the message, but your ego can also help the energy be transmitted more easily, and it can make the energy more relatable, right? So distortion is not bad, but it's just like how much is it being distorted? In what way is it being distorted? And do you feel comfortable sharing that level of distortion? So for me, there's a specific level of distortion that I know is just not for me, and also not for me to share. So that, I think, is how I will describe the difference. Psychosis and hallucinations and delusions and just all of that stuff that comes along with mental illness, I put that in the bag over here as spiritual experiences that are so distorted that they are not useful, meaningful, or anything good for me or anybody else. They just go in the garbage over there. I don't really have those anymore, right? Now I have clear, beautiful, inspiring experiences that are only being distorted a normal amount, an acceptable amount, by my own ego, by the level of ego that I have right now, by the level of blocks and distortions that I have right now. And I feel most of the time that level of distortion is acceptable for myself and acceptable to share and to post to whoever is watching this video. So I've probably been fumbling around this for long enough. My point is, guys, the only like point I have here is that never feel like you are suffering alone, because there are literally millions of people who feel your pain, right? Like literally millions of people feel what you feel, right? Literally millions. No matter how unique you think your suffering is, it is not. There are millions of people feeling what you feel, right? If you have shame about anything you have experienced in the past, anything that you've done in the past, anything that has been done to you in the past, just don't. Like, just why? Why, right? Why? I refuse to feel shame or even regret, right? That's the thing, right? Because if you think you're in a place of, I don't feel shame, but I still kind of regret it, well then that's not complete acceptance and a complete healing of it, right? So I don't regret sticking my hand in the toaster as an act of self-harm when I was seriously crazy. I don't regret it. I don't feel shame for it, and I don't regret it. And I'm good with that. And I will not apologize for that, because that, to me, is me like completely making peace with that part of my life. And it's really funny because back when this was my experience, right? I felt like so much of a victim. I felt like so much of a victim all of the time. And if anybody had floated the idea to me that I had chosen this, that I had done this to myself by choice, that I had chosen to be mentally ill and been crazy like this, that would have been the most triggering thing anyone could ever have said to me. Because I would have said, no, I did not choose this. No, I am a victim, right? Now it all makes sense to me, right? Now it all makes sense to me, because this truly was the best way for me to set up my life, right? I have learned so much. I have healed my ancestors by healing myself. I have purged negative energy from myself and from the planet by walking the path that I have walked. I have learned compassion for others, because you do not truly I think it's very difficult, right? All I can say is I was in a state of consciousness that was so low that I could not feel compassion for others if I could not relate to their pain. So now, through the lessons of bipolar disorder, I've experienced the entire spectrum of human emotion. And that puts me in this place where I can feel compassion for others no matter where their pain is coming from, because I have felt the full spectrum of human emotion, right? I've felt the whole the whole thing. So it taught me compassion, and I needed to be taught compassion because I was in a state of low consciousness where I did not have compassion, right? Bipolar also teaches you about duality, right? It teaches me about both ends of the spectrum and how you can inhabit both sides, right? Depression and mania, could call that yin and yang, right? That's a whole story that is just too much to describe, right? But so I also chose this experience because of the cosmic lessons it brings to me, the understanding of duality, because I have lived it out energetically inside my own mind, right? And finally, the experience of being healed from this, when they told me, your disease is incurable. You will be on medication for the rest of your life. You will feel, that's what the doctors tell you. I mean, I understand. I don't really mean to be criticizing the doctors that much, because they're trying the best that they can to help with the tools that they have in the state of consciousness that they're at, right? They are trying to help, even if psychiatry needs improvement, right? They are trying to help how they can. But they look at you and tell you, you're going to feel like this forever. You will never be cured. And here I am, still so early on, right? I had my healing I was around 30 years old, just after my Saturn return, 30 years old, and I was healed. And now to walk around being on the other end of that is so powerful, because I see everyone, and it doesn't matter what your problem is, right? It doesn't matter if someone's dealing with mental illness or physical illness that is supposed to be, lifelong and chronic, or if someone is just in a shitty life situation, or if someone just feels like their life will just never get better. I'm like, anything is possible, guys. You can be instantly healed. You can be instantly transformed. You can leave your body and go into the golden light and have your problems literally removed from your body, from your energetic system, right? You can experience miraculous healing any moment, right? That day when I left my body. You think I woke up that morning thinking today is going to be the day I'm going to be healed? No, I had no idea, right? It just happened. Oh, and I didn't have to do anything, right? I didn't have to do anything. There is no process to healing yourself. There's no process to healing yourself. It is only the willingness to be healed, right? And the willingness, when the golden light showed itself to me, I had to take that leap of faith. I had to say yes. And I could have shrunk back, and I could have denied myself that experience, because it's scary, right? It's scary, because you could get sucked in. And if you've never had an out-of-body experience before, and if maybe you've never had that kind of spiritual experience at all, it's entirely natural to cringe back, to hold yourself back, to get freaked out, to get spooked. So the only thing you got to do here is a willingness to be healed, and a willingness to take that leap of faith, to leave your body if need be, or to have a healing hand come down and interact with you, right? You just have to be open to the healing. You have to be open to the healing. Or like the day when I was face down on the floor, and before the dragon came to me to destroy my heart, right? Again, none of that, I didn't have to do anything. I was literally just sitting on my floor, and this all happened. But again, it was just an openness, a willingness. I had to, that feeling of, I am ready to be done with my suffering, right? I am ready to be healed, right? That there was that core deep inside of me. I am ready to be done with this. I am ready to be healed. And then I had to allow myself to merge with the dragon. Again, this is just a process. There is no process. There is only surrender. There is only surrender. There is only surrender, right? And then I had to be willing to destroy my own heart. I had to be able to look at my heart and see that it was disgusting. I had to be willing to look at my heart and say, I need to kill that. And, sometimes when I describe, this is kind of violent, right? Sometimes when I describe spiritual experiences that are kind of violent, if you've ever heard me talk about psychic self-defense, how I was trained in my dreams to defend myself from astral parasites, and I was trained by my guides to incinerate them, to light them on fire. And then people go, oh my God, but you're like, that's violent, you're murdering them, right? And I'm like, that, I don't know, it is what it is, right? And I guess if you're incinerating astral parasites, right, I don't see that. First of all, I was trained by my own higher self, by my own guides, by my spiritual team to do this. And, when you incinerate an astral parasite, they're just being sent back to where they came from so that they can be healed and they don't need to exist as a parasitic entity anymore, right? So I don't see that as a bad thing at all. So I don't know, a willingness of being doing what you need to do, right? The willingness to do what you need to do in order to feel better. Willingness to do what you need to do in order to be healed. So in my case, I had to be willing to eat my own heart. Had to be willing to kill my own heart, to violently attack it with the jaws of a dragon, right? I had to be willing to do that. That was part of my healing process. And of course, I'm not saying that your experience has to be like that, right? You could have a completely different experience. You could see your heart and it could be rotten, and maybe some beings will come and they will just give you a heart transplant, and it won't have to be, a dragon eating it. Or maybe they will just come and maybe the heart can be healed, right? Maybe it doesn't need to be destroyed and replaced. Maybe it can just be healed with light, right? Your experience doesn't have to be mine, right? This was only my experience. My only point is that all you have to do is be willing for your experience to unfold, right? And even if it seems like, whoa, what's going on, right? Even if it seems like you might pop out of your body, even if it seems like you have to eat your own heart, you have to be willing to go through with it. And that's all, right? That's all. I truly and firmly believe that if you are truly, truly ready to be healed, and you are truly, truly ready to be transformed, and you are truly, truly ready, and you want it, and you are asking for help, asking for the spiritual help, right? And you're ready to surrender to the process, and you're ready to take that leap of faith, and you're ready to just release yourself to that experience, that you can heal anything right now. And I say that because I have done it. Right? I say it because I have walked the path of my own healing. And your experience will be unique to you. It could look entirely different from mine. I'm not here to tell you what your healing journey will look like. I am only here to tell you that healing is available to you right now. And it will happen for you precisely when you are ready. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have asked for help a million times before. Because like I said, right, there was something different about that day. I was ready. I was actually ready for it. Isn't it weird to think all those other days when I was sticking my hand in the toaster, I wasn't actually ready to be healed? Isn't that weird? If you had told me back then, if someone had came to me and said, well, you're still suffering because you're not ready to be healed, I would have been like, right? I would have been so triggered. But now, in my own hindsight, I look back and go, yeah, I actually wasn't ready to be healed. So I had to wait to the moment where I actually was ready to be healed. And I had to be ready to be healed. And I had to be open, and I had to surrender to the experience twice, right? For me, it took two spiritual healing events. And you can get help from people to do this, but you don't need any help from anybody, right? You can do this alone in your own living room. It's just a matter of being ready, of being open, and of taking the leap of faith, right? Of taking the leap of faith. So, and that's all. That's my story. That's all I got on this topic, guys. Sending you so much love and light. I'll talk to you later. Bye.